There are a number of things that I would want to understand about an organization before I counseled as to whether they should look at a regional or a local or a global strategy. I would want to understand the nature of the business, the nature of their technology, the nature of their infrastructure, the culture of the organization, sort of what their ambitious was, the need for speed of execution, what their risk model looked like. Like, there's a lot of stuff that would factor into that. I would say, in my experience, in the organizations that I've worked most closely with, the desire for speed and predictability in terms of user experience and the reality of being at the front end of regulatory and legal scrutiny in virtually every jurisdiction within which we operate, there is substantial risk to fragmentation and differences of approach and tremendous benefits to maximal uniformity. It also, from your user narrative, if you're a consumer-facing business, being able to speak with one consistent message to your users around the world as your products evolve and change, and you can share with them in a full-throated way with a single clear vision. This is what our products do today, and this is what we are hoping and intending for them to be able to do for you tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's extraordinarily powerful and really, really valuable. If you hyper-localize, or even if you regionally fragment, your ability to do that becomes limited. You're creating a headwind and a tripwire for your business in the future in saying, we think that this is the best possible version of our product, but it's only going to be available in these regions. And this is sort of the suboptimal version of the product that we're going to make available in these other regions for these reasons. There are times when you have to do that. But in my experience, those are suboptimal outcomes, and they're outcomes that you probably want to navigate around. But again, there's a bunch of presumption based in sort of that fact pattern I just laid out. That's a consumer-facing service. That's when you're trying to communicate with billions of users. That has assumptions baked into it about the nature of your business. If in fact you were exclusively an enterprise technology, if you had a narrower addressable market of large, sophisticated companies, and those companies' needs from a compliance perspective or otherwise had significant divergence from one region of the world to another, it may very well make sense for you to instead counsel that a regional strategy makes a lot more sense. It might in fact give you more flexibility and a higher level of fluidity and mobility so that you can adapt to change market conditions and outcompete the people that are around you. It helps, I think, again, to turn back the clock a little bit and think about how we got to where we are. If you go back 10, 15 years, there was a cluster of data security breaches, major technical events that resulted, I think, in an amplification of board level visibility for cyber and cybersecurity risk. You saw the CISO becoming a much more predominant position sort of on the top of mind for board level risk oversight, including audit committee. And I myself, in my own experience at that time, I was finding myself called in to audit committee meetings, governance meetings with the CISO, with whomever was in charge of technical security for an organization. At that time, you saw security being very well funded, very heavily resourced, I think in part because it was a more quantifiable risk. And it was easier for folks from the security discipline to demonstrate the risk avoidance ROI for making significant investments in technical security. And you had a period where privacy folks were kind of struggling to differentiate themselves. So there was very, very significant effort to draw a line of demarcation saying, actually, privacy is not security. Security is a more mature discipline. It's a more technical discipline. Privacy has more of a policy element to it. When I say that, I mean external policy as well. Your relationship with regulators, your relationship with users has significant impacts on the amount of risk that an organization is carrying in a data protection context once you account for privacy. And I think that's where we are now. So GDPR and just the incredible amount of legislative activity and litigation activity we're seeing around the world for non-security related privacy risk is adding a level of complexity that is requiring corporate oversight over some of these, what I would say, softer disciplines. And I'm watching organizations adapt to that, right? So some organizations are creating new committees like a privacy, security, technology committee, and they're peeling some of that away from the audit committee to give it more direct, dedicated, focused oversight attention. I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, I do think we are moving into an era when it is going to become expected from a corporate governance perspective to have this more nuanced level of sophistication over these issues, where you have people that, yes, understand technical security, yes, understand the criticality of understanding and containing and managing cyber risk, but we're also going to need elevated levels of sophistication and awareness for this broader legal risk, this policy risk, these more intangibles, to make sure that organizations are setting their strategy appropriately and managing around those risks. So it's interesting, right? Like, as I said, historically, privacy worked so hard to differentiate itself from security and get sort of a focused seat at the table. I don't think that's so true anymore. Now, I think over the last few years, we have increasingly seen the cyber executive and the privacy executive brought into the room at the same time to share both sides of it. This is what we are doing from a technical infrastructure perspective to minimize unwanted or unauthorized access to data, to minimize exfiltration, those kinds of problems. And then the privacy person is explaining, and this is how we are ensuring that data is only being collected, used, processed, disposed of in a manner that's consistent with the reasonable expectations of our users, and to deliver on the promises that we're making. I think that's happening organically. Those roles are kind of sorting it out amongst themselves. I will say, I think it is mistaken to assume that you should be teasing those two things apart as deliberately as we did 8-10 years ago. In part, the European view on data protection is affecting and influencing global trends about the way legislators and policymakers are thinking about this space. And from a European conception, it's all data protection, right? Like, data protection is not a discipline that's associated with either cybersecurity or with privacy. Data protection is this entire envelope of activities that involve responsibly collecting, processing, managing, disposing of information in a way that sort of respects the fundamental rights and freedoms of users that are guaranteed under law. So all of that to say, I feel like these things are coalescing. I think the risks are distinguishable enough that you are going to have at least one senior member of management that's primarily accountable for each of those risks. They can report up into separate organizations. In my company, for example, our CISO, Royal Hansen, reports up into a different one of Sundar's direct reports than I do. But we work very, very closely. We speak every day. We are constantly comparing notes because our risks are so inextricably related that if he has an adverse event in his universe, that is inevitably going to have significant consequences in mine and vice versa. So we're close partners, and I think those kinds of partnerships are going to become more common.